What is up, everybody? Brian Mendler back in your life on another Monday edition of the podcast. And I am super excited today to be joined by Heather Thompson Day, who is joining me from Colorado, correct?
Denver.
Denver. How are things in Denver? Good?
You know what? It's doing well. We're doing good.
Good. Warm right now there?
There's like a heat dome. So it's going to be like in the 90s and hundreds for the next several weeks. So it's crazy hot.
Do you like it hot? Are you a hot person? Like, do you like things?
So I'm originally, my family is from the Bahamas, my dad. So it runs in my blood. The Caribbean blood is within me. So I like it hot.
Interesting. Where in the Bahamas is he?
Nassau.
Okay. So tell me more about that. So your parents are both from there?
So my mom is white. My dad is Black with Caribbean and Native American. And long story short, my dad was on Broadway and he was doing a show called Jesus Christ Superstar, and my mom was his waitress. And the second he saw her, he turned to his showmate person, I think he was a musician in the show, and said, "That's my wife." And they've been together like 40 years.
Get out.
No, true.
So what I love Broadway shows. I'm a huge Broadway show fan. I've never seen Jesus Christ Superstar. I want to see it, but I'm a huge Broadway fan. So what was he? What did he do?
He was in the show, Jesus Christ Superstar and Hair. I'm not sure if you've seen that one. I know I never saw it. I'm told it was a very raunchy show because my dad then became a pastor, so he totally changed his life. But I know he like swang naked down on a rope.
Crazy.
That's what I'm told.
Was he like literally on Broadway though, like in New York City on Broadway, or did he? Wow, that's really neat.
Yeah. So he was in Jesus Christ Superstar. He was Simon, and he tells me all the time he got standing ovations. I mean, he says it was his calling.
Get out. Amazing. So he's from the Bahamas. Have you been to the Bahamas? Do you have family there still?
We do. If you open a phone book in the Bahamas, in Nassau in particular, you'll see Thompson taking up most of the phone book. So we do still have cousins and stuff there, and I've been.
They still have phone books?
Well, last
When's for real though? When's the last time you've seen an actual phone book? Right?
That tells you the last time I was in the Bahamas, and how dare you play my life like that? My childhood memory, you're coming for it.
I love the Caribbean. I love the Caribbean. How great is the Caribbean though? Just to go down there and visit, it's literally, I mean, the best, right?
Crystal blue, nothing like it.
I know, true. So anyway, it's good to have you. And I actually first started following you, I think a little less than a year ago on Twitter, and I've reposted a bunch of your stuff on my Instagram, and I just thought you would be a really fun, inspirational person to talk to just about your experiences. And I actually told you before we started, I want to read a couple of your tweets for people who haven't followed you, because I'm interested to just, when I read your tweets, I love how you're able to, some people are just really good at Twitter, right? At capturing a story and the amount of characters. But when I read those, I usually get done and say, ooh, I want to know more. And I have like more questions that I want to know, which of course aren't frequently answered. So I got one right here. I'm going to read it. It's one of my favorite ones. You know, and this was the one that went crazy viral for you. It said, I had a student once who entered college with a 1.2 GPA. She finished with honors and a full ride scholarship to her next school. She was the same person she was in high school. Only difference is that in college, for the first time in her life, she had a bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my students, she went on to a full ride at Western, and I think she DM'd me. I think she saw that. I never put her name, but I think she saw that tweet and just DM'd me and said, thanks for telling my story. But she really teaching in public higher education, because I grew up in a private education system most of my life. I went to public high school, but then all of my college experience was in private. And so going into the public system, and especially working in a community college, was life-changing for me. And I really got to see like just the importance of having an educator who sees you, you know. And I had students who, I just felt like I had so many students. I had a student that pulled up her sleeves once in a speech and showed us the cigarette burns that her mother had placed there. And these are young people who were expecting to perform in a particular way. And these are the things that they're going back to, you know. And that one student, I remember her telling me just about sleeping on the floor with roaches and how she was molested by every adult male she ever knew in her entire life. And it was just really eye-opening for me as living a very sheltered life to just realize, wow, like everybody's experiences are so different. And how dare we say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right?
So what do you say back when a student says that to you? How do you respond?
I my process is typically to go on a real journey with them. And I know that not everybody can do this, and I obviously can't do this for every student. I will sit and have office hours with every student, but there are certain students, like this one in particular, I have a few others, that I will go on a lifelong journey with you. I have students that I taught 7 years ago that will still text me when they're in a bad situation and say, do you have $100 that you can cash at me? And I will absolutely do it. You know, like there are some people that you have to get involved in their lives and help them get a car. Like those basic fundamental things. I've had students that we helped get into government housing because they just didn't understand the process and the paperwork of it. And they absolutely were in need of it. So for me, I think it's important to take the time where you feel like that deep connection to actually get your hands dirty and get involved and do the long work of getting involved in people's lives.
So, wow. I mean, so as a teacher, right? If I'm a teacher and I'm listening to that, where do I start? When you say go on the journey, that's kind of broad. And if I'm not exactly sure, what exactly do you mean specifically by that?
So what I mean is getting involved in the students' lives who are really seeking after you. Some people just want a conversation, right? Other students are really looking for a mentor. And so there are students that it starts off as a conversation, but as I see that the relationship is actually fruitful, I'm going to keep investing in that student and take them as far as I can take them, and the hope that they change the direction for their children.
Do you find that most kids open up like that though? I mean, because I feel like, I mean, wow, to have a kid open up in that way to you, I mean, I feel like you have to at some point have either created a relationship already or be so open to building a relationship, and the kid must know that.
It's funny that you say that because I have people say that to me all the time where they're like, man, I would have never talked to my teacher like that. And I don't have the answer as to why. I don't know what it is about me that so many people will, like, I'll meet strangers in the store who like start sharing their life. So I don't know what, I'm really into energy. So I don't know what energy I put off, but for whatever reason, I have had tons of students throughout the years who do go there and share some of their deepest, darkest. Well, I will say I teach communication. So the content material that I teach is, I spend 3 weeks just talking about relationships.
Mm.
Most teachers will never get to do that. 3 weeks, we just talk about conflict and relationship and what does love really mean? What does it look like? So I think the content that I teach is part of that. The other thing I can say,
What does it really look like? Wait. When you
you want
say
to go
that,
there?
yeah, oh yeah, for sure, for sure. I'm so interested.
Okay, so this is straight from a communication course, all right?
Bring it.
Love is a blended emotion. So we have primary emotions and we have blended emotions. Love is a blended emotion. And what that means is you have to feel two emotions simultaneously at the same time in order to create the emotion that we call love.
Hmm.
So the two emotions that have to be blended to create love is trust and joy. So I'll have students all the time that will say to me, Dr. Day, I love him. He just cheats on me. I love him. He just hits me. And I say, you literally cannot love them because love is the culmination of trust and joy. So when we use language appropriately, it puts relationships into focus. So I tell them, say it again, except use language appropriately. Say, I have so much joy with her. She just cheats on me. I have so much joy with him. He just calls me horrible names, but I have so much joy with him now. When we use language appropriately, it helps us not use a word like love to mask all of these horrible toxic situations that actually aren't love at all. And the same thing is with friendship. Friendship has to be mutually productive and characterized by mutual positive regard. That's what friendship is.
Slow down. Slow down. So you don't know my background. I struggled in school. I can't process things that quickly. I'm a special ed kid. What? So just slow that down and break that down for me.
So
So interesting.
friendship has to be mutually productive and characterized by mutual positive regard, meaning we both make each other better people. That's the definition of the word friendship. So many relationships, we say, this is my friend, but it's not, because this person plays my life. This person steals from me. This person makes fun of me in front of other people. That is by definition not your friend. So stop calling it that. And so I say to my students all the time, you understand the definition of the words we use, and let's start putting them in our relationships, and it changes the entire relationship. Because then what we start saying is, what is this? What am I in? It's not a friendship, because by the definition of friendship, that's not what we are in. So why am I spending all this time with somebody who makes me a bad person, or makes me a negative person, or puts me down and makes me feel bad about myself?
So why do we? Like, why do
Because
we spend so much time in those, so many
I,
people?
I think because we don't use language appropriately a lot of the times. Because the second we start using language appropriately, it forces our brain to acknowledge the reality that what we are in is not what we are saying we are in.
Can you
Does
give
that
me
make sense?
another example of using language appropriately versus inappropriately? Would you say
Yeah.
versus inappropriately even, or just,
Yeah. Okay. So, for example, another one I say all the time is the words "I'm sorry." So when we often will say like, "Oh, I'm so sorry that I did that to you," and we're not sorry, because the definite, like, sorry, remorse is a blended emotion. So again, we blend together the emotions of disgust and sadness. So if we aren't disgusted with ourselves over the behavior that we did, we aren't sorry. We're sad. And so let's say it correctly. Let's say, "I'm so sad that I cheated on you. I'm so sad." And let's see how that works with your wife.
mm,
Right? It's a whole other thing for you to say, "I'm disgusted with myself over what I've done to you, and I'm sad." I'm both sad and disgusted. And people, when they hear that, it's going to change how they view that relationship, right?
yeah, yes. But so why though? Why does it do that? Like, why? Because it does, right? And you see it differently. You hear it differently.
I think it's just, it snaps us, it puts a cold bucket of water on words that we hear and see all the time. And
Yeah.
it forces us to, like, an example I say too
That's a
is,
great thing for teachers though, too, right? So go ahead, finish.
no, you go ahead, finish that thought.
Well, I was just thinking, because I think sometimes teachers say I'm sorry to kids, and I think maybe a better approach would be taking the I'm disgusted with myself. I'm sad with how I reacted to your behavior, right? Versus I'm sorry for how I reacted to your behavior. I'm sad because it gives you the specific emotion, right? Is that
Right.
why?
That is genius. I have never put that on myself as far as being an educator in the classroom and the times that I have to apologize for my behavior. That is so good. And what we're doing then is we're like taking the power dynamics and shifting them and putting us on a level playing field to
Yes.
acknowledge that we make mistakes too. And it's not just an "I'm sorry" that I'm going to brush off. That's deep.
Right. And it's a great lesson for a kid to do that with people in their life, right? It's this constant trickle down effect, because what we teach kids go and apply and use in other aspects of your life. How did you get into this? Like, how did you get into being a word? I am too, right? I love communications. I struggled in school until I got to college, and I took my first public speaking course, and I dominated. I never knew what it was like to dominate in school until I took public speaking, and I watched everybody with a podium and with notes, and I got up there and I had no notes, no podium, and I just went, and people were like, whoa. And I knew, I didn't know what I was going to do with my life, but I knew education might be it, because where's a profession where I could be in front of people? How was that for you?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be a journalist. And I took a general level communication class, I think my sophomore year in college, and it just changed my life. So I see communication as relationship building. And once I realized that's what this is, like, I get to build relationships between the target market that I'm trying to reach and whatever organization that I'm trying to represent. Once I understood it in that terms, I was like, this is like by my nature who I am. I'm a connector. I love connecting people to resources that would better their lives, or other people that I'm like, "Oh man, if you knew that person, you guys would do so." I love even just matchmaking romantic relationships. I love connecting people. And so when I realized there's a field that studies how we can best connect people to other people, forget it. It took over my life, and I fell madly in love.
I'm surprised that you're not a sales rep, right? Because, I mean, no disrespect to what you do, it's fantastic, but that's what sales is, right? Sales is all connection and putting people together and getting people attracted to you and your energy. And I see that in so many different aspects of life to being successful in whatever you do.
But what I hate is that, so those skills are typically seen as extroverted skills. And the thing about communication is communication, I actually personally think, is far better for introverts, because the base of communication is listening. And so I always have students that will sit in a class, a gen ed of mine, and just be like, this isn't me. Like, I don't even like people. I'm not extroverted. I can never do that. And I'm like, no, this is exactly for somebody like you, because you naturally listen to your audience. And if you listen to them, how much better can you communicate with them? Once we go through basic skill tools that will better your ability to communicate.
And I think listening is the hardest skill that there is. And I'll tell you, for me, I always struggled with it my whole life. Always been a good talker, and I've always struggled with listening. But my podcast has made me a better listener. It's forced me to listen. I have to listen to my guest in order to respond. And then I have to listen to the entire episode. And when you watch yourself and listen to yourself constantly, you're always critiquing yourself and making yourself better. And so you get that skill. Do you teach that skill to your students, the skill of listening? And if so, how do you do it?
Yeah, we do. So one activity that I have students do is they have to pause 30 seconds between each word. So I'll pair them up with a partner. And what actually happens is it
Let's
forces
do it.
your, do you want to?
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll be your partner.
Okay, let's do it. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Where
So I have to do it.
are
Oh,
you from?
Rochester, New York. It's so hard.
It's so hard, right?
Yes.
But studies show that so for example, if you're in a fight with somebody and you put a 30-second pause between each word, it forces your brain to want to use the least amount of words as possible. So we stop dumping on people all of our emotional feelings, and we get to the root of what we're actually upset about. And people are much better able to have a conversation with your argument, right? The logic of, oh, you're mad that I did this, other than, and you did this 10 years ago, and you always do this, and you never do this, right? So it forces you to choose words that you really want to use. And it actually like tells your brain to stop with all the emotions and start going to the logic processing of the brain. And it makes it a better listener.
Hearing what instead of how. One of the things that I teach teachers is if you can hear what kids are saying and stop instead of listening to how they're saying it. What happens a lot of times in school with kids is their how often ruins their what. Their what is actually quite intelligent, but the way they deliver the message is so bad that the person on the receiving end can't hear the message because they're so caught up in the delivery. And if you can teach people to focus on what is said versus how it's said, usually it changes your mindset. And I hear this as a fantastic strategy to go about working at doing that.
So my husband was an assistant principal for a while. He's a pastor now, but he loves education. And this example fits so well with what you're talking about. He had a student that got in an altercation with a teacher because they told him to pull up his pants, right? So his pants are super far sagged. The teacher says, pull up your pants, and he starts cursing the teacher out and all this stuff. When my husband meets with the student, the reason is because his pants were too short. He couldn't afford new pants, right? So he would rather look bad than poor. And if we never stop, and we always look at the behaviors like you just said, and we never stop to say, but why are you behaving this way? Where is this coming from? We never fully understand other people. And we're really good at doing this with ourselves, and we're really bad when it comes to projecting this onto other people.
I think especially our own family. I think it's really hard to do it with your own family. It's, I often think we often take out our biggest anxieties and emotions on the people we love and care about the most. And I always wonder why that is.
So you want to know what's funny? This fits exactly with what you're saying. And this is something I teach in communication is, so all of relationships are based on self-disclosure and reciprocating self-disclosure. Do you want to know where we self-disclose the least is in marriage? So relationships that initially are built on what are your dreams? What are your fears? What do you want to be? Start becoming conversations about groceries and who picks up the kids and tasks. And then we're unhappy and we're lonely. I think it's over 60% of people who are married are lonely, right? And it's really based on this one skill where we stop information seeking from the people that we are closest to.
Do we do that though because we think we know everything already?
I think so. I think that's what happens. And we forget that just like we know that we ourselves are not the same person as we were 10 years ago,
Right.
neither is our partner.
Right. Everybody's always growing and helping people facilitate that growth. And again, I think that's the same. You can apply that anywhere, right? It's the same with kids and their teachers in school. I mean, even if you only see a kid once a week for fourth period, they're not the same kid as they were in September as they are in April, you know, and if you can continue to ask those questions. So how do you do it then? What is the specific skill that you would say to keep that from happening, from getting stale, so to speak, in the
Well,
relationship?
for anyone who's listening, you can Google Dr. Aaron Arthur. This is specific for marriage. I don't think I've done it outside of that, but it's called Dr. Aaron Arthur, ARON, 36 Questions to Fall in Love. And essentially, he was a social scientist who wanted to see if information seeking would lead to intimate relationships. And so he brought two strangers into a lab. They designed the questions to be a natural progression of relationship building. And they sat for 2 hours and they went through these 36 questions. And in this experiment, these two people got married. I recommend it to every student. I recommend it to women everywhere. Like, go on a date and Google Dr. Aaron Arthur's 36 Questions to Fall in Love. Me and my husband did it on my 30th birthday. It was our best date of our entire lives. And it was
Really?
questions that we never thought to ask each other. Like, the questions are not just like, how's your relationship with your mom? It's like, how do you think your relationship with your mom has changed the career that you went into? So it's things that you've never thought about. And I know as a communication person, that information seeking is directly tied to intimacy. So we have to go through those behaviors. And what does that look like in a classroom? Like, how often are we stopping to ask people what's going on in their lives and how are you?
You know, and I think not often, not as often as we should be in a regular classroom, that's for sure. I mean, I think it should be the foundation of every classroom, right? When you say you take 3 weeks to do relationship building, what does that actually look like?
So we go through what it means to be in a relationship, different conflict styles that you have in a relationship, different love styles, because often what happens is we just use different love styles as like human beings. We have different natural ones, and then we automatically say, well, you're boring. Well, it's not really that they're boring. It's that your love style might be manic, which is highly emotional, and we're up and we're down, and that feels good. And maybe you're in a relationship with somebody who's more pragmatic, which for that person, filing your taxes for you is love. That's how I show you I love you. I'm not going to say it and yell it over the mountaintops, but I will file your taxes. And that action is showing, man, are you kidding? I'm so committed to you. I just filed taxes. So we often mislabel each other because we don't understand. And so for me, when I make students take like a love style quiz and things like that, or a conflict style quiz, it just helps us first better understand ourselves so that we can see why we're reacting in certain ways to the people around us.
It's so fascinating. So you grew up, you said, sort of in a privileged lifestyle, you said. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? Did you want to be in education? Were you an education person as a kid? Were you a good student?
I was expelled. So I was expelled. That's why I ended up in
Wait.
public school. I was expelled in 8th grade. I would not say I was an education person until college.
Why were you expelled?
You know what? That is a long story.
Come on, tell it. We got time. There's no time limits on podcasts. One of the great things about it.
Um, I was in a private education system, and I just think that they didn't know how to handle people who ask questions. And my personality has always been, don't just tell me what we're doing, tell me why. And I even like when I
Me
approach my
too.
classroom, go ahead.
No, me too. Me too. I was just saying me too. Go ahead.
Yeah, even when I approach my classroom, I like to tell people just even some of my resume. I tell my students on the first day, I give them a list of my failures and a list of the things I'm proud of so that they know where I'm coming from. Because for my brain, that helps me decide whether or not I should listen to you. right? So I try to give them the things that I didn't get as a young person. But so in middle school, I just think in the small school system I grew up in, they just didn't want anybody to ask questions.
But you don't get expelled for just asking questions. So because I did too. I got kicked out of school when I was in 6th grade, and the final straw, it was a bunch of things. The final straw was I told the teacher to her face that she was a shitty teacher, which to this day I maintain that she was. So I don't feel bad about it. I should have probably said it in a better way, maybe, sort of. I think I should have, but that was sort of the final straw for me. There was a bunch of stuff leading up to it, but my issues were all around reading. I struggled with reading as a kid, and that was my foundational struggle. And then that led to behaviors in other places. Was there something for you as a kid, like a root cause of it?
I just think once you get labeled something, it's hard to break from that label. So once I started asking questions saying like, hey, I think this is dumb. Why are we doing this? They started saying, oh, she's a bad kid. And so then I kept behaving in the label that they gave me. I mean, I'm not kidding you. I would come in the morning, I would still have my backpack on, and I'd hear on the loudspeaker, Heather, come to the office. And I would just spend my day sitting in the principal's office. So how do you break out of that when people expect you to be bad before you've even done anything that day?
Yeah. Wow. So that was in 8th grade. And then tell me the progression. How'd you become Dr. Day
Oh, so
from there to there?
I wasn't expecting it. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought I was going to be a journalist. And I took that class in my sophomore year and I was like, oh, I really like communication. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll work at a publishing house and do something with communication or be an agent or something like that. But as I was taking the courses, I think in grad school, they had me teach a lesson. And my teacher, who actually, she didn't even like me that much, but she pulled me aside and said, you are a really good teacher. Like maybe you should look into this. So then I adjuncted during my master's program. And that first day that I taught a class, I went into the parking lot and I just cried. I said, I knew, like, that moment where you just feel all the purpose in the world. And it's like this light bulb that says, this is what you were born to do. I knew it. And I got in the car. I said, this is it. Forget it. I'm going to get a Ph.D. I'm going to do this for the rest of my life.
And you love it still, obviously. By the way, you said you do an activity where you tell them four things that you're proud of and 4 of your struggles. What are a couple of those things? I'm just curious.
Oh, no, I tell them my rejections. So I love people to know that where they see you and where you started are often, there's a big gap in between those, because I want them to know that anything that they see in me is possible for themselves. So my first day of I teach a writing for communication class with people who want to be either social media content creators or authors. And so I open that class by telling them all of the people who rejected me. And I have just tons of rejections, right? And I saved some of the letters from book publishers that say we all agreed Heather is one to watch. And for years, I just felt like, man, that's going to be on my tombstone. That's always what I hear is Heather has so much potential, but I never felt like I got my break. And in the last year, so much of my life has just changed because of social media, which is funny because I used to be kind of like a prima donna about social media and say oh, it's destroying society and all this stuff. And now I'm like, dude, I love it. Did you see this meme? It's so great.
Yeah. I think social media is a double-edged sword. I love it and hate it at the same time. I mean, I think it multiplies everything times 10, right? So if things are going well in the world, it makes everything seem 10 times better. And if things are not going well in the world, it makes everything seem 10 times worse. And I think I personally have to be careful in that realm and not letting the emotional side of social media get to me.
Yeah, but I love how it's leveled the playing field. So I have a student she plays basketball, and she came up with this page called Basketball is Psychology. And her emblem or her logo is a picture. It's half a basketball and half a brain, right? She has thousands. It's like 50, 60,000 followers on Twitter. It might be more. And major NBA coaches have purchased her product. They have no idea that she's a 20-year-old girl.
Right.
They've asked her to speak at coaching seminars. So she shows up and they're like, wait, they thought it was a 50-year-old man, and here's this young girl ready to go. So I love how it's leveled the playing field for people who have great, awesome content and ideas to not have to wait to share them with people.
Right. And the downside to that, not that I'm trying to play Debbie Downer, is it gives the bullies a place to hide, right? It's because there's a
Yes.
lot of bullies on social media and they can hide behind being somebody that they're really not. And and I've seen both sides of it. I've seen both sides. Have you ever had any hate on social media?
Are
Or
you
has it been
joking?
mostly love?
I am a Black Christian woman who speaks all the
I know
time.
it.
So I get a ton. But I turned off my DMs. So now I have, like, I just put my earmuffs on and now I'm living a great life.
Do you
Once
read the
I shut,
comments? You read them though? Like, do you read comments when you post something that might be controversial?
I never read comments on anything that goes viral. If it stays within my sphere, if it's like 500, 600 likes, I'm fine. I'll read those comments. Once we get into the thousands, I won't go back because I know, you know.
It's hard to not go back though. You want to peek.
Oh, not for me, because I don't want. So I just came to a place
You're
where I was like,
smart.
I'm tired of having these people who I don't even know
Yeah.
ruin my day, even for 10 minutes. Like, I don't even want to spend 10 minutes on whoever the heck you are worrying about, oh man, do I really come off that way? Did I seem, I just forget it. I don't even
How
read
did
it
your
anymore.
life change? When you said your life changed for the better in the last year, how specifically?
I started all of a sudden getting tons of, well, I got a big book deal that I'd been praying for the last 5 years with my agent to get. And all thanks to social media. I've had people that I would have never even thought that I would be able to have conversations with reach out to me and say, we want you to do projects, because I felt like it leveled the playing field for me, social media.
Good for you. I say that about myself too, and not even just social media, but the whole world. I mean, when I first got out of college, I always wanted to be a TV sportscaster or a radio host, right? And I applied for a million jobs and I didn't get any because it was impossible to get one. Like you'd have one radio show in one city and the person had been there for 40 years and who's going to break into that? A million people applying and now they have podcasts where the bottom line is there's nobody who can give me a show. I can do my own if I want and no one can stop me. And I can push one button and send it out to the world, right? And people find it. Like people, if they like it, they find it, and so it's opened the doors, right? I feel like the communication world is now open to people where at one point it was much more closed than it ever is today.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that it's created this participatory culture where everybody wants to give their input. Like, I think we should all collectively have opinions on things and take the time. Like today, I was like, man, I want to know. I read this article that said that the United States gives more money to jails and prisons than it does to education. And I was like, man, I don't know anything about that. I need to start reading books. So I went on Twitter and I asked for books, and now I can start reading, and then I can give some input on what I think about our incarceration system. Like, the world has never been more open for any of us to learn whatever we want to learn. I tell students all the time, I'm like, guys, if you just read 12 books a year, one book a month, 12 books by the end of the year on whatever topic it is that you really want to be a voice in, read 12 books this year. And next year, let's see what happens. And you're going to just be overflowing with information. This is awesome that we have the ability to get ourselves wherever we want to go.
Yeah. The only excuse nowadays is laziness. It's the only
Yes.
excuse. There's no other excuse. I mean, if you have a thing called YouTube, you can learn anything and figure anything out. You just have to be willing and able to put in the time. And I think a lot of people aren't willing to do that.
I think you're absolutely right. I think a lot of people don't want to read the books.
So what about your book? So you have a book coming out. Is that do you have a title? What's going on with
Yes.
that?
It's called It's Not Your Turn. And
Cool.
it's about all the years of my life that everybody else. I remember this one day, one of my best friends, I couldn't get a job in academia outside of adjuncting. And I'm just crying in my house. And I'm like, man, God, like, I feel like I've done everything right. I've stayed in school. I had a good GPA. Come on. And one of my best friends calls me and is like, Heather, I just got hired by NASA. And I'm like, great. That is so great for you. Right. I'm so happy for you. Right. And I just had to stop and say, it's not your turn, but it's hers. So clap for her and show up for her and make a big deal out of it, because one day your turn will come, and who you are when it's not your turn is 10 times more important than who you are when it is. And so that's what the message I want to share with people is, what things can we do? So it's not your turn right now. That's fine. because who you are when it's not is preparing you to be the person for who you are when it is. So let's use this time wisely and not just sit around moping.
And the truth is, you never know. You might not think it's your turn, but it might be your turn while you think it's not your turn. That's a great thing for me right now with COVID, right? So when COVID hit, I lost probably 20 workshop dates, canceled. Just I don't get paid for them, right? And for a minute, I was kind of like, whoa, what happened? But the truth about the last 13 to 14 weeks of my life is they've been the best that I've ever had, right? I'm talking about I've spent unbelievable quality time with my children in the pool, at the golf course. Like, I'm going to get emotional, literally watching them grow up. And the truth is, I'm not a person who stops on my own. I needed to be stopped in order to stop, because if I'm not stopped, I miss it, right? I missed the first 8 years of my son's life. I know that now because I've been here for the last 14 weeks. And I think sometimes what you go through in a minute while you're going through it, it seems bad. But when you get through it, you look back and you're like, best thing that ever happened to me. Like, my whole life has a new perspective now. Even when I get back on the road and start traveling, it will never be the same. It will always be with this understanding of what true quality time with my family feels like. And I feel like that is a perfect match for me. I can't wait to read it.
I love that you're talking about that, and I hope you keep talking about it, because this generation, I'm talking about like my students, college students, is the first generation that doesn't prioritize family over career. Every other generation, when you say like, where are you going to be in 5 years, the answer is always something about family. And with Generation Z, it's, oh, I hope I have a lot of money. I hope I finish my degrees. I hope I'm in my career. And the same thing that you're talking about is exactly where I've been in my journey this past couple years, is realizing, man, I want to be a whole person, so that when I stand on a stage, it's coming from a place of wholeness, not trying to like perform in order to keep feeling loved or to keep feeling validated. I want to be whole before I ever get up there. And if something happens where I can't get up there anymore, I want to still be whole. And so that comes from leaning into those people who love you and have your back, and just give, you know what I mean? Give you the warm fuzzies. Yeah. We've got to spend more time in those spaces as Americans in general.
How has the pandemic been for you and your family? I know you have 3 young kids as well. How has it been on them? It's been good and bad on my kids. It's been hard, but it's also been good for them.
My kids have been really happy because we just moved to Denver a year ago. They were really struggling moving and fitting in at a new school. So they would love for me to homeschool them and them to just stay forever. So they've really enjoyed it. And I have been this summer. It's actually really funny because everybody who asks me to do anything, I say no. You text me and I'm like, all right, I'll be there. You're the only person I have said yes to all summer.
Thank you.
Yes, I'm in a season of no right now. And it's been really, really good for me because I don't know if you know the Enneagram. No, mm-hmm. It's like a person. It's the new Myers-Briggs. Get in on it, okay? It's great.
Tell me.
I'm an Enneagram 3. I know your listeners are going to know. I'm an Enneagram 3.
They're all smarter than me.
I'm a 3. So instead of, how it used to be like ENFJ and all that stuff, now it's you get a number and it tells you different things about your personality, your strengths and your weaknesses. So I'm a 3, which is an achiever. I wonder if you're an achiever too. And
so how do I do me? Can we do me? Do you know how to do it? Can we do it right now?
No, you have to go online. You have to Google the test and take the test. It takes you probably 10, 15 minutes to take it.
Okay.
But I'm telling you, it was great for me. That they gave you your right number. I was in my office by myself and I was uncomfortable. And I kept looking behind me like, does anybody see this? Like, I felt so vulnerable. Because part of 3s is that we perform in order to be loved. And it says like typically raised in like a traditional Christian home. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is me. I learned very early that my worth is based on how well I can perform. And so I've had to undo so much of that. And I would have never been able to put the language to it had I not done the Enneagram. So now I'm like, it doesn't matter what you achieve. It just matters about your relationships. That's what makes you successful.
Which makes you achieve more.
Exactly.
Right?
But in a healthy, happy way, not out of desperation. And if I don't get this, it's going to kill me.
I'm so interested right now. It's great.
You want to do the Enneagram right now, don't you?
I do.
You should do it.
And then I want to tell you.
Do it.
I will. I'll do it. I'll do it.
Please text me and tell me what your number is.
I will. No question. Listen, these 45 minutes or so fly every time. Is there anything that you would like to leave my listeners with?
Yeah, I think the only thing that the tagline I like to talk about is just that we all need to listen more, right? Like we always think communication is about whoever can talk the loudest or the fastest, and it's really about who can listen so that we understand where people are coming from. Put yourself in the shoes of the listener.
Yeah, I learned, I'm you might not know this about me. I'm in addiction recovery, and one of the things that they say in there is that if you scramble up the letters in the word listen, you get the word silent. And it's important to remember that in order to listen, you have to be silent. And I've had to work on that for sure in my life, to where I thought I was in a conversation, but I would interrupt someone or I would talk over them. And now the word silent matters to me a lot more than it ever did. And really and sometimes it's even happened during our conversation where I'll try to really like almost go to an uncomfortable pause with someone just to make sure that I'm not overriding what they want to say, because I know I have the tendency to do that.
But for just so you know, for your brain, it's great. We often think that like silence is a sign that the conversation is bad or not. It's actually a great thing for your brain because it's allowing your brain to process what's been said and fully step into it.
Yes, I'm with you. Heather, thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I could do this again. Hey,